Welcome back to Science 10. This is 2.4 case study, the interaction of living things, and this is from the CD4 booklet. So the interaction of living things, if you take a look here, on September 26, 1991, 4 men and 4 women entered a gigantic dome near Tucson, Arizona that contained 3,800 species of plants and animals. The dome was sealed after they entered, so it looks something like this. And they were to live in there for 1 year. Nothing further was to be brought in, and nothing would be allowed out. So it is completely sealed, just to see how humans, animals, plants, if they can interact and live together in a sealed place. And of course, this was built to see if we could actually have something like this out in space. There's a movie called Silent Running, which we may watch, and they did a very similar thing. Named Biosphere 2, the dome is the largest and most expensive artificial ecosystem ever created by a Texas billionaire. And of course, he is hoping in creating something which could be used in space exploration. And then of course, this part here highlighted the experiment to demonstrate in a fairly short time that we don't know everything about ecosystems. And despite the planning that happened here, the amount of carbon dioxide in the air inside the dome kept going up, up, up. So to avoid suffocation, the people were eventually let out, or they are allowed purified air inside. So they weren't able to set that delicate balance between plants and animals in order for both to survive. Okay, but this is actually they're still experimenting with this, and you can look it up on the internet, and the Biosphere 2 still actually exists. So of course it's different than this question here, how would this be different than an apartment complex, which is closed in as well? But an apartment complex has an air exchanger which exchanges air with the outside. This doesn't. So eventually we may have to have something like this, have ecosystems out in space. It would be good if we could actually put this together and make it work. If you look over here, now this balance between plants and animals, etc., was first looked at by someone by the name of Priestley, Joseph Priestley, in the 18th century. One of the experiments he did was have a candle inside a glass jar, so inverted upside down, no other air was allowed to enter or exit, and of course after a while the candle would go out because it used up all the oxygen. But when the candle was present with a plant, the candle stayed lit longer. And if you look down here, I think the candle just in the jar by itself went for 3 minutes, but with the plant, 5 minutes. Similar experiment, a plant in a jar. Of course, the plant would eventually use up all the CO2, so eventually die. A mouse eventually would get suffocated because all the oxygen would eventually run out. But together, plant and mouse together, the mouse would stay alive for a longer period of time. Of course, it eventually died, but with the plant in there, it lasted a longer time. So similarly, we've talked about this before, the idea of photosynthesis and respiration. So plants and animals do help each other. If we look at the photosynthesis equation, we looked at this earlier, carbon dioxide and water yields sugars and oxygen, so that's what plants do. And living things, animals, etc., like you and I, we take in sugars and oxygen, make carbon dioxide and water. So you can see both of these processes are opposite to each other. So respiration is not exclusive to animals. Any organism that requires energy will also undergo some form of respiration. Therefore, plants also undergo respiration. This might lead you to assume that plants can maintain a balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide by themselves, but plants produce about 9 times as much oxygen by photosynthesis as they use in respiration. Okay, so the idea here, maintaining a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide is maintained because plants provide oxygen and sugars, while animals provide carbon dioxide and water. The process of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, as we've seen in an earlier assignment, are complementary, which means they support each other. Okay, questions I'd like you to do for this section. Write a hypothesis for Priestley's first experiment. So what was a prediction that he would have had before he put this plant in? What prediction would he have made, do you think? 2, and in what ways are the candle in Priestley's first experiment and the mouse in the second experiment alike? So what similarities does a candle and a mouse have? 3, explain why algae have been taken aboard space stations. So algae are a form of plant. Why would we take them up to space stations? 4, the scientists running Biosphere 2 hypothesized that if they put a certain mix of plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria in the dome, the ecosystem created would be self-sustaining indefinitely. So evaluate their hypothesis. So do you think it would turn out that way? And then B, Biosphere 2 was not self-sustaining, but can we call the experiment a failure? As I mentioned, Biosphere 2, if you go to Tucson, Arizona, you could still actually see it. They're still experimenting with it. So comment on the outcome. What could we do in terms of science? And then lastly, 6, previously modern scientists have used living organisms and experiments to discover how things in their ecosystems work. Is the use of living things ethical? So that's one question. Is there a difference between using humans, mice, mint plants, or bacteria in this way? So is there a difference between using animals versus plants? Because as you can see here, eventually both die when we're experimenting with them. Write a set of rules that would impose on scientists who wish to use living things in experiments. So just make a short list. Answer this, then make a short list of standards that you would put in place. So of course, question 6 is a very opinion question, and I'm interested to see what you think about that. Alrighty, so that is 2.4.